download the past paper from the website as well. All right? I suggest you to download about 5 years. For those more than 5 years are already outdated. It's difficult to read the answer anymore because the date or the weight, etc., or even the law has been changed. So I would suggest you to have listen to the audios in order to have a quick reference of what is being exempted for the last few years. All right? And then download the past paper for your preparation of the examination. In the past paper, you refer to the past paper analysis, then you know what is more likely to be examined in the coming exam. All right? Today, I will explain this PowerPoint, but mainly for 2 major topics, which is stamp duty as well as depreciation allowances. All right? That is the overall approach you need to know. All right? I will now start explaining the PowerPoint. Oh, this is our firm's reference. In case after this seminar, of course, you can stay behind to ask questions. Or even during the discussion, you can ask questions that mainly focus on examination. At the end, you can write to me so that I can answer you for preparation of your QP examination, especially Module D. All right? Okay, a little bit introduce myself. I study the professional accountancy examination. Luckily, when I graduate, I passed all the professional examinations. I got audits in Hong Kong, #1, before working experience. So there is one way of tackling your examination. And then I get tax #2 in Hong Kong. So I choose to do tax, which is more suitable to me. So I have been in IRD and also some other big firm for tax practice. So currently, apart from teaching tax, I also teach Module B and final exam. And I also practice my tax clients. So if you have questions on especially examination questions, let me know. For tax practice, if you have questions, you can also call me for discussion. Okay, today's discussion is about stamp duty and depreciation allowance. As I mentioned to you, for examination purpose, first of all, observe what has been examined before. If stamp duty is not examined, will you be here tonight? 會唔會㗎？唔會住咯，係嘛？今日禮拜5咧，好多禮拜6咧，好多嘢可以做啊。Okay, therefore, let's review the past paper analysis first. At the end of this PowerPoint, you have a page called Keynotes. At the end of this PowerPoint. All right? Now, spend a little bit, maybe 3 minutes, review from the end what has been examined in the past. In the last page is the last diet in June. All right? So have a quick review of the highlighted item. Observe what has been examined for stamp duty as well as depreciation allowance. And more importantly, how many marks and the frequency of happening of these exam topics in the past. Okay, what is your general view of the past papers for stamp duty and depreciation allowances? For example, what is the weighting? On average, how many marks involved? If you refer to page 5, in 2005, the examination has been tested depreciation allowance by section B, which is essay or short questions, by 80 marks. All right? But if you refer to the recent style, the last page, page 8, in the last exam, depreciation allowance is asked in section A, only involved few marks. All right, out of the 18, only involved few marks. You can see the details by downloading the past papers. And then for stamp duty, again, only 2 marks. So on average, stamp duty and depreciation allowance, you can guess maybe 10 to 15 on average. For your examination waiting, you have 3 months to go for your examination preparation. Allocate your time by this weighting. Assume 10 to 15 marks for depreciation allowances as well as stamp duty. Alright? Apart from that, remember to try download the past papers and try to work out the examples and review this particular past paper analysis for guidance. Okay? And then we go ahead for stamp duty discussion. Refer back to your PowerPoint on page 5. If you can code this sentence in the examination, you probably get 1 mark. What is stamp duty? Will the document involved be charged for stamp duty? You start by answering this sentence. The documents will be subject to stamp duty if they fall within 4 heads of charge in the stamp duty ordinance. In examination, you can write short form like that. After writing stamp duty ordinance, you write SDO, and then subsequently for every quotation, you can write SDO for simplicity. Alright? So that is maybe amount for 1 mark. If you can code, documents may be charged for stamp duty. So if there is no document involved, there will not be any stamp duty involved. For example, if I enter into a lease with you by verbal agreement, 我同你簽一個租約，不過係口頭嘅啫。There's no document involved, and then there will not be any stamp duty. Alright? And then for examination purpose, what I have just mentioned to you, is try to think about how to write the answer. Alright? You can only write this sentence within 1 mark time involved. 1 mark means about 2 minutes. Alright, you read the requirement, you write the answer, you may only write this short sentence for 1 mark. And then what you need to focus is, what are the 4 major heads of charge? Alright, not every head of charge is common and examinable. Only 1 or 2 are more common for examination. Then focus on this 1 or 2 head of charge. Alright? Okay, apart from that, what are the common head of charge? Transfer of shares, which is in head 2. Non-residential property， 即係工業樓、商業樓。And then head 1A, which is residential property. So then you come up with 1 question mark in your mind, whether in your examination you need to code the section or authority. 使唔使 code 呢啲嘢落去啊？考試嘅時候使唔使 code 啊？ According to my understanding, I have been in the HKICP as education director before, organizing the examination. According to my understanding, if you only write the principle without writing the authority involved, you are playing around 80 marks out of 100. 你即係讓賽緊㗎咯喎，可唔可以 follow 到啊？所以記得盡量去 call 翻個 authority 落去。All right. So head 1, you have head 1.1 for non-residential property transfer, and then head 1.1a for residential property, and then for lease, there's no differentiation between residential or non-residential property. For lease is head 1, 2. So altogether, basically you are summarizing 2 basic head of charge for examination. The other 2, head 3 and head 4, later on you will observe that they are not so important. All right? And then for head 1, you have 3 major head of charge. And then for head 2, there are actually 2. One is head 2 1 for transfer of shares. And then head 2, 4, we call instrument of transfer. So altogether, there are 5 major heads involved. Head 2, 4 is instrument of transfer. 係嘛？好啦，你盡量咧聽個 concept，因為好多嗰啲字眼咧喺下邊有晒，係嘛？你盡量聽嗰個 flow 啦，係嘛？嗰啲writing 咧下邊有晒㗎啦。OK， so how the head of charge involved in order to answer in your examination. If more marks are allowed, you will code more details. Head 1.1, the instrument involved. So in your examination, when you are discussing or writing answers for stamp duty, if marks are allowed, point number 1, what is the instrument? That means the document involved. For transfer of property in respect of Head 1.1 non-residential, we call this document as conveyance on sale. That means assignment. 咁中文即係過契。咁你買層樓咧，過嗰個契去咗一個新 owner 咁解。Alright， 你去到考試咧唔好寫中文喎，我啲 marker 唔識解嘅喎，係嘛 ？OK。Then the first item is conveyance on sale. But if you are buying and selling residential property, Head 1.1a, the instrument involved is agreement for sale. In normal term, we call it S&P. That means sale and purchase agreement. Alright, so the instrument involved is different. Okay, and then in respect of lease, quite simply, the lease document. That is the first item in examination. If you are allowed to write so many points involved, that means they give you a lot of marks. Point number 1, the instrument involved. Point number 2, the amount of stamp duty. Okay, stamp duty, there is a scale in your learning pad. As far as I remember, should be chapter maybe 6. All right, chapter 6. Chapter 5 is non-residence. 好，我哋信呢位同學係 chapter 6. 哦，8 OK. Chapter 8. There is a table in the learning pad. You take out the table, belong to your critical file. All right. In that table, you can check each scale for stamp duty amount. But for writing faster, that means marks are not allowed. You write the minimum is 100 for property below 2 mil. The minimum is 100 and the maximum is 4.25%. 嗰啲貴價樓啦，最近咧係邊啲係最賣得啊？有冇睇啊？咁你唔睇地產報咧，應該都睇娛樂版㗎嘛？咁啊，劉嘉玲買緊嗰啲係邊度啊？深灣9號 ，OK？ 深灣9號度咧2000幾蚊，2000幾萬起跳，咁嗰啲咧就會 subject to 4.25%啦。可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁你考 QP 咧，嗱考完咧最重要就係買到深灣9號啊！因為咧你讀 QP more 咧想做一個 successful accountant 係嘛，所以而家暫時咧 focus 咗個 exam 先。Alright, okay. Then for other points, sometimes the transaction involved is under market value. The IRD will charge the transaction based on market value. Alright, okay. So in case the marks allowed are a lot, then you explain in detail. You take out your chapter 8 of your learning pad about the table of stamp duty. What exactly the stamp duty equitable weight? Alright, for minimum weight is 100. Maximum weight is 4.25% of the value of the property or market value. Lease, in respect of residential property, the same. And then for lease, there are different situations. The first situation, you are paying premium only. you are not paying rent, you are paying a lump sum only, then your stamp duty rate will be as above, like conveyance on sale, based on the scale. Minimum 100, maximum 4.25%. If your lease compensation involve rent plus premium, then the premium will be on maximum rate. So there is a difference in between. If your compensation is only premium, there will be a scale. If your compensation is premium plus rent, the premium amount is 4.25%. And the rent amount will be based on a percentage on yearly rent. So the percentage minimum is 0.25%, maximum is 1% based on the lease term. Okay? In examination, sometimes they test you in section B, a case for individual. That individual lease a property to a tenant. Then they ask you what is the stamp duty amount involved. That means you need to do the calculation. All right? Okay, then that is most important part. The last one is a duplicate, which is normally not exempt. So we focus on the first few items highlighted here. Okay, then move on to page 7. Head 2. Head 2 is regarding shares. As I mentioned before, the focus is on Head 2.1 and Head 2.4. Again, the instrument involved is called bought note and sold note. So altogether, each note requires 0.1% of the transactions consideration. So altogether is 0.2%. For instrument of transfer, you need to pay another $5. So if I sell my company's share to you at, say for example, 1 million, the stamp duty involved is 1 million times 0.2% plus $5. All right? So in examination, for examination purpose, sometimes we only mention 0.2% because this $5 is minimal. All right? Then think about how to memorize this. If I want to buy a company, as I mentioned to you, this company worth 1 million. How much is the stamp duty? 1 million times 0.2%. All right? If that limited company worth 10 million, what is the stamp duty? 10 million times 0.2%. All right? However, why I want to buy this company? Because this has a property which worth 10 million. So this company worth 10 million. So you have a choice to buy this company directly or buy this property directly. If you buy the property directly, you need to pay maximum, what is, say for example, this is 30 million. What is the maximum rate involved? 4.25%. All right? So which way, item 1 or item 2, which way will involve smaller stamp duty by the company? All right? So this may be set as a testing of your tax planning or stamp duty planning idea. So first part, advice, asks you what is the stamp duty amount involved if I buy the company. Second part, what is the stamp duty involved if I buy the property directly? Then third part, what is your suggestion for minimizing the stamp duty? I will suggest to buy the company, the stamp duty involved is lesser. Here is only 0.2%. All right? In your learning pad, in the exercise involved at the end of the learning pad, there's some tax planning example. One of the tax planning skill is to play around the percentage involved. And obviously, stamp duty for shares will be lower. All right? Okay, lastly, head 4. Duplicate part, like copy, is only $5. So normally it's not so important for examination purpose. And bearer instrument is not common in Hong Kong, so normally it seldom happens in your examination as well. That's why I mentioned to you, you summarize head 1, fee, head of charge, head 1, 1. Referring back to page 5, head 1, 1, head 1, 1A, and head 1, 2. And for head 2, head 2, 1, mainly. Sometimes head 2, 4 in model answer as well. Okay? Okay, move on. Immovable property, and all these points is to try to summarize what happens above. The other point is that I have mentioned the instrument on the second column, and then the duty amount. In examination, sometimes you need to mention about who is liable to pay. Liable persons. In the ordinance, it mentioned that jointly and severally liable. That means the buyer and seller, they are equally liable. Or the landlord and tenant, they are equally liable. So in law, they have to pay 50% of the stamp duty involved. In practice, buying a property, you need to pay the 100% stamp duty. That is the practice in Hong Kong. But in law, it is 50% shared between the buyer and the seller. All right? Then move on. Different transactions involved. Here, worth to highlight is that Section 45 exemption. This exemption is so-called group relief. Later on, we will explain in more detail. And this item is commonly examined. If you review all the relevant past papers, group relief is commonly examined. And for group relief, try to understand that exemption is not available for lease. That means group relief only applies to head 1, 1, head 1, 1A, and head 2 only. It is not available for head 1, 2, which is lease. All right. Okay, and then for just now we mentioned about point 1 is about the instrument. Point 2 is about the duty amount. Point 3 is the person's liable. For stamp duty, you also have to mention about the point 4. What is the time for stamping? Page 9. Okay, in your learning pack, there is a table mentioning all the relevant timing for different types of instruments for stamping, which I have also reproduced at page 16 of page 15 of this PowerPoint. All right. So at the moment, remember there are 4 items to be written for your examination. The last one is timing for stamping. All right. Then the table at page 15 is actually your critical file notes. If you are asked about writing the timing involved, then you refer that table. All right? Okay, then move on page 10, below the variation. Just now we mentioned about the duty amount is on certain percentage. Normally, we will use market value based on section 27(1). The value is the market value rather than the under market value consideration. When is the situation for under market value? When the parent gives the property to the children. They may normally gift. We call it voluntary disposition into FIFOs, means gift. In examination, it may not be necessary wholly as a gift. It may be payable by $1. We call it inadequate consideration. Example, $1. If that is the case, we call it voluntary disposition in the FIFO situation. Then stamp duty ordinance required by Section 27(4), market value will be used. All right. When you study variation, remember this links to what we have just discussed for point 2 duty amount. Normally based on the market value. Then the valuation, how to determine? We use Section 27(1) or Section 27(4). These two major sections. All right. Okay. Then move on. For property transaction, basically, before reading page 11, I draw a diagram for you to understand the difference between buying a residential property or non-residential property. The normal transaction of buying a property, if you draw a timeline like that, you need to sign a provisional agreement, 即係臨時買賣合約. And then the agent will ask you to sign a formal S&P in the law office, formal sale and purchase agreement. And then after maybe 6 weeks to 8 weeks, you need to sign again another document called conveyance on sale. All right. If you are talking about non-residential property, Head 1.1. Remember the 4 items to be discussed. The first one, what instrument is to be stamped? The instrument to be stamped is here. Conveyance on sale. All right. And then what is the second item? The second item is the duty amount. So the duty amount should be $100 to 4.25% of market value. And then the third item, who will be liable? Buyer and seller, jointly and severally liable. And then the fourth item, timing, starting from the signing of the conveyance on sale. 30 days, which you can refer to PowerPoint page 15. So we can draw similar diagram for residential. If I write down residential at the bottom, at the top is non-residential property. Below is residential, which is head 1.1a. Using similar notation, the document to be stamped is S&P, not the conveyance. So if that is the case, what is the difference? The difference is the timing for stamping. All right? The second one and the third one, 2 and 3, same as non-residential. The only difference is item 4. The timing will be from the S&P 30 days. That means earlier. But the ordinance provides some exception unless application for deferral. That means delayed the stamping. Application for deferral. Same as that for head 1.1. That means starting from the conveyance. 好啦，呢度點解咧？曾幾何時咧，為咗幫嗰啲人買樓啊，咁咧就俾佢哋延遲啲去交 stamp duty， 延遲到好似商業樓咁樣，可唔可以 follow 到啊？好啦，咁而家咧就想打擊炒樓咧，就有 special stamp duty。一陣我話俾你聽咧 ，special stamp duty 咧會考啲乜㗎啦 ？follow 到啦嘛 ？OK，why I draw this diagram for you? It also mention one more point which is a little bit difficult in case they test you in the examination. If there is subsale here, that means I buy a property without going through the conveyance on sale transaction. I subsell the property to another person already. 咁中文咧，即係我做摸貨咁解，聽過啦嘛？摸貨 subsell by 點解叫做摸貨咧？咁喺呢個字嚟啦 ，subsell by confirm more. I am not the legal owner. I buy the property from you, the legal owner, and then before register as legal owner, I already subsell to other person. Alright, then I am the confirm more. 咁我就係摸貨啦，可以嗎？如果97摸頂咧，即係要蝕好多錢咁解，係嘛？而家咧係咪已經係好高峰啊？咁你唔好試下摸頂咯，摸頂咧咁你考完 QP 都冇用㗎咯。可以留意到啦嘛？ Okay, so what is the stamp duty involved? For residential property, this is actually an agreement. Subsale is an S&P. Therefore, this will stamped again. All right? So in residential transaction, the S&P will be stamped once. If this is subsale for the property, then another document, the subsale document will be stamped again. This is quite different from non-residential property because non-residential property only tests on conveyance on sale here. 可以嗎？所以一陣你聽咧 ，special stamp duty 咧就係打擊下邊 residential property 啫，而家仲未打擊上邊 non-residential property， 可唔可以留意到啊 ？All right. Okay, for stamp duty is like that. Then, in order to mention about the scope of charge, that is scope of stamp duty charge for property. Then you can use this diagram to better understand the transactions involved for stamp duty on transfer of property or conveyance on sale. 可以啦嘛？如果係考試嗰陣時咧，其他 straightforward 1、2、3、4咁樣照答啦。不過咧，呢一個係可能會係比較複雜啲，你要留意啦。subsale 嘅 situation 可以啦嘛？ Okay, so move on back to the PowerPoint at page 11. Exemption. When you study tax, no matter is stamp duty, profit tax, sales tax, etc. Once you have identified the transaction, the document, or the income, etc., falls within the scope of charge, like Head 1, Head 2, etc. The next issue, you need to observe whether there is any exemption involved. For stamp duty purpose, there are two major exemptions which are more related to business transaction. One is Section 27.5. We call it no beneficial interest is transferred. Example. Transfer of property. from trustee 個信託人 to beneficiary 受益人。In that situation, there's no change of beneficial interest. Therefore, no stamp duty is required. All right, that is more business-related transaction. The owner normally transfer the property to the trustee first, and then actually it's for the benefit of the beneficiary. Once the trustee, the legal owner, transfer back to beneficiary, that transaction will be exempted because there's no change of beneficial interest. All right, you try to refer to the past paper analysis I have given to you, and then download the relevant past paper from the website and check whether this has been exempted before. Once or twice has been exempted. You need to know how to practice in your examination. And then as I mentioned, the most important exemption in stamp duty is so-called group relief under Section 45. This involves intra-group, that means within the group transfer of shares or immovable property. Therefore, excludes lease. Even there is inter-group lease, there is no exemption involved. All right? And then what are the conditions involved? These must be between associated body corporate. Actually, these terms, associated body corporate, involve two conditions. One is what is associated. All right? Associated means these terms. If one company owns another company 90%, or they are both owned 90% by another company. All right? If you want to write more concise, you may write at least 90% common beneficiary, common benefits, so ownership. 起碼有90%係一個人 own 一間公司 own， 可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁你就唔使寫咁長咯。如果 for examination purpose。Another point you need to observe is the body corporate. If the transaction is like that, a individual own two companies, both 100%. This company owns a property. If that property is transferred to another company, which is also owned by this individual, exemption will not be allowed because even though they are associated, they are not owned by body corporate. They are company owned by individual. So be aware of this trap. When you see they are associated, exemption may not be available. If they are company owned not by body corporate, means incorporated company. All right? If this is company owned by individual, no exemption of Section 45 will be allowed. Okay? Okay, after that, there is another section you need to observe, so-called adjudication. This is mentioned in Section 13 of SDO. Adjudication is compulsory for Section 45. It means that if there is exemption for Section 45, you need to put forward the document to Stamp Duty Office for adjudication. This is so-called a formal assessment procedure. Normally, you pay only nominal charge. You don't have to pay the full-scale stamp duty if exemption is available. Okay, this is so-called adjudication. In examination, you must mention this if Section 45 is available. Otherwise, you have not done the proper procedures for exemption purpose. Another point you need to know is the association must be at least for 2 years. If the association is not for 2 years, within the 2 years after the exemption, association is ceased, then no exemption will be available. This is so-called anti-avoidance. 中文咧即係反避稅條例咯 ，anti-avoidance provision. For stamp duty ordinance, there are 2 major anti-avoidance provisions in relation to Section 45, which are stated in the next PowerPoint, page 13. The first one is the one I have mentioned, the relationship must be maintained for 2 years. If that is ceased, then Section 45 relief will be revoked. That means not allowed. That is one of the anti-avoidance provisions involved. The second anti-avoidance normally will be examined in the examination is the finance, so-called group finance. That means the transfer of property or shares must be provided by the group. If this is provided by unrelated party, Section 45 is also not allowed. These are the 2 major anti-avoidance provisions for Section 45. 咁如果你睇啲 past paper 咧，多數如果考 Section 45咧，就要寫埋呢啲 point， 可以嗎？ Okay, group finance, there's another exception involved. If the group finance is from bank, that means they are actually not group company. But for stamp duty exemption, the tax practice is allowed. The collector will allow this for the transfer. That means if the finance is by a bank, the Section 45 is still available. All right, we call it not cause a denial of Section 45. 如果問銀行借咧，咁 Section 45咧都可以 apply 到，可以俾佢 exemption 咁解啦。follow 到啦嗎？ Okay, regarding the timing for stamping, page 15. The first 2 is for property, which is 30 days after signing the document. Execution means signing the document. And then for the other 2 is head 2, shares. Shares, normally instrument of transfer should be same day. If these are for shares transfer, should be 2 days after execution if effected in Hong Kong. If effected outside Hong Kong, 30 days. 咁有陣時考試係咁樣咯喎，佢話俾你聽咧，我2個朋友咧就喺澳門賭錢，其中一個咧輸咗，即時咧賣埋啲股票俾人。喺咁嘅情況咧，應該係幾時打 stamp 咧？由於係 execute outside Hong Kong，準佢30日內打 stamp。可唔可以 follow 到啊 ？OK， 點解要留意個 timing 咧？咁啊睇下邊嗰度咯 ，page 16。Actually, the timing involved will affect penalty. That means if you have late stamping, 遲咗打 stamp 咧要罰好重嘅喎。The minimum is 2 times. Within 1 month, the late stamping will require 2 times penalty. For more than 1 month but not existing 2 months, 4 times. And then 10 times for more than 2 months. 咁係咪好難記啊？咁去到考試咧，佢問你得1分嘅啫，咁你會點咧？又記唔到咯，咁點寫啊？你話 heavy penalty， 咁就啱噶啦。如果唔係咧，你抄得嚟呢一頁咧，已經唔夠時間噶啦。其中一個考 QP 嘅重點咧就係 do not open the book， 係咪 open book exam 啊？唔好 open the book， 你一 open the book 咧寫唔切噶啦。可唔可以 follow 到啊？好啦，咁點樣可以唔 open the book 都好容易咧？你快啲睇啲 past paper， 將嗰啲精要咧 summarize 翻，落邊度啊？落翻個 past paper analysis 都得啦，係嘛？咁嘅時候咧，你做 answer 你會快啲咯，係嘛？考 QB 係咁樣樣嘅喎。如果我譬如喺國內咧教 QB 啲學生啦，國內嘅學生咧中意咁樣嘅，要明咗啲嘢咧先擺入腦嘅，係咪咁樣㗎？中國人讀書係咁樣，唔明嗰啲嘢唔擺入腦㗎嘛，係咪咁啊？所以佢哋咧中意係 understand first, pass later， 因為佢要 understand 嗰樣嘢好耐㗎嘛。我哋香港要咁樣 pass first, understand later。你如果係 for 考試 purpose 咧，要盡量理解咗個重點喺邊度，因為得3個月考一次試。我咪 follow 到啊？幾時考啊？你哋12月幾號啊？29喎，考完就可以順便去機場搭飛機去過年，係嘛？留意翻 exam focus 喎。Okay, another point is that, as I mentioned, this is regarding penalty for timing, late stamping. In examination, sometimes you will quote, okay, because the late stamping penalty will be imposed, blah, blah, blah. If you remember, you quote exactly. If you don't remember, stamp duty penalty will be imposed for late stamping. All right? And another point is that why we need to stamp the document. Apart from stamp duty penalty, there is another reason for stamping, because the collector may take civil action to trace you through the court for payment in respect of unpaid duty. So the stamping, why you need to stamp, another point is you may be prosecuted by the stamp office through the court action. All right? What are the other reasons for stamping? At the end, page 18. If your document is not stamped, this will not be admitted as evidence in court. And also, if you buy a property without stamping, the government officer cannot be acted upon. That means the legal owner is not registered in the land registry, 即係地政處啦，係嘛？ So your document must be properly stamped. Okay, the points just now mentioned in the examination, they may ask why stamping is important, may account for 5 marks. Okay? Okay, then, which is quite interesting to a lot of students involved. 有啲同學咧問 special stamp duty 咧新加咗落去嘛，好似一定考係咪啊？好，跟住咧公會就咁樣講。咁公會講點講咧？第一，佢個名個 email 唔好寫啦。咁佢講咩？考唔考啊？咁我就睇到呢個字啦。考唔考？好，今期唔考，即係話咧，如果再唔讀咧，即係你 pass 唔到咧，下期要考，所以一定要快啲考，係嘛 ？Special stamp duty 唔考住，點解咧 ？For 你 information 咯，幾時係通過咗呢個 special stamp duty 啊？知唔知啊？喺邊度睇到㗎？幾時通過？娛樂版睇唔睇到啊？睇唔到㗎啦。好啦，走去稅局個網頁，成日都有啲新嘅資料嘅，係嘛？唔使專登走去睇報紙啦，走去稅局個網頁，佢都會有 new information。6月30號今年 effective，enacted。effective 咧，舊年11月20號 係嘛？如果數咧係數幾時係 enacted 就立咗法例啦。幾時考啊？12月29號考，係咪啱啱超過咗6個月啊？得唔得？如果喺今年6月29號以前發生嘅嘢咧，就應該要考。啱啱6月30號先發生咧，即係唔使考，可唔可以 follow 到？今期唔 pass 啫，即係要讀， follow 唔 follow 到啊？好，咁啊，其他啲唔關事嘅咯。Alan 咧係我哋 Module C 嘅老師，其他唔關事啊，呢啲當唔知㗎啦，係啦嘛。好，咁個 special stamp duty 咧 ，so just give you a note for reference. Effective from last November. All right. Why is that? This is regarding residential property buy and sell. If you sell the property, 呢度另外有一沓俾你㗎，係嘛？呢度有另一沓俾你嘅，咁你可以 highlight for 自己 reference 啦。萬一下次要考嗰陣時，都知道發生咩事啦。係啊。Okay, if you buy the property or sell the property within short periods, you need to pay additional stamp duty. We call it special stamp duty. The shorter period you buy and sell, you pay more additional stamp duty. All right? And then the other is for reference, like the second page. Who will be exempt for paying special stamp duty? 譬如咧，我買一層樓，哇，搞唔掂喎，短期內要賣鬼咗，可唔可以 exempt 咧？我唔係真係炒嘅，咁呢啲 exempt 就有 touch about 咯，可唔可以 follow 到啊 ？These two page for reference， 可以啦嘛？係咪唔使考都要等埋一邊啦？一陣，等埋一邊一陣。好啦，咁啊 stamp duty pack 咧有冇 exercise 喺入邊嘅？有冇㗎？有嘅喎。喺個 learning pack 咧，喺後邊咧有4個 case， 嗰4個 case 咧我 update 嘅。好啦，嗰4個 case 就係啲 past paper 嚟嘅，即係將啲 tax rate update 晒佢啦，或者啲 law 改過嘅 update 咗佢啦。會唔會考啊？你估？會唔會考嗰啲啊？唔會考，點解？既然都睇到，梗係考好少啦，係咪？如果唔係咧，不如我哋攞本 learning pack 去到考試現場。剪咗 cut 落去咪得咯，咁所以咧多數唔考嗰啲喎，所以你要練嘅時候咧，你點樣練咧？你睇咗啲 past paper 啦，同個 past paper 咧好類似嘅咧，唔會好多嘅，聽唔聽得出？好啦，你反而咧要係練睇到呢條題目點樣諗到個 answer， 呢個 thinking process，follow 唔 follow 到啊？喺你嘅考卷嗰度咧就會 remix 晒好多唔同嘅題目，跟住呢 facts 咧改到亂晒。咁咧令到你咧冇辦法好短時間內咧係抄到個 answer。如果份卷咧係俾3日你考，1月2號先至交咧，肯定 pass 啦。但係咧佢要你喺3個鐘頭搞掂佢喎，所以咧你要練嗰個 thinking process。follow 唔 follow 到啊？好啦，我 thinking process 啫。頭先我哋咪聽咗啲 key points 啊。而家你要練嘅咧就係我睇咗呢條題目，我諗到啲乜嘢 key point， 然後係等於個 answer 嘅。你要練呢個位咯。換句話說咧，我哋要做 answer plan。好，咁我講啲 exam skill 先至入嗰個 technical point 啦。10分嘅題目即係要答18分鐘，可唔可以理解？乘1.8啦。好啦，咁我哋睇呢條題目咧，你估需要幾多分鐘啊？淨係睇個深色嘅 requirement， 通常我哋睇深色嘅 requirement 先啦，因為我睇完個 requirement 發覺係唔識嘅可以走啦嘛，唔使再睇上面啲 detail。我哋一般睇個深色嘅 requirement 咧，大約每一個 part 咧30秒就搞完㗎啦。好啦，咁即係話你要睇1分鐘到嘅啫。如果我睇埋上邊咧，即係睇多3-4分鐘啫。如果我18分鐘要完成咧，即係話我冇咗成5分鐘㗎咯喎。理唔理解到啊？我得翻13分鐘。呢13分鐘咧，我諗點樣寫，又冇咗5分鐘，即係得翻8分鐘，理唔理解？係嘛？好啦，而家你要練嘅咧就係，如果考 open book 好簡單咧，我將可能會發生嘅問題咧列好晒，自己一早抄定晒先，可唔可以 follow 到啊？然後我呢8分鐘就去諗，我抽邊張紙出嚟剪落去，佢唔剪得嘅唯有快啲寫落去，可唔可以理解到啊？好，我哋要諗呢一個 answer plan 咯喎。我哋咧就唔好嘗試，咦呢條題目咧，我哋考試嗰陣時呢條題目，咦好似曾經做過，
咁啊鉗啦。咁你翻屋企揾下嘢咧，多數係唔會揾到嘅。你想揾嗰陣時揾唔到，唔知點解，係嘛？如果你去考過咧，你發覺咧而家好啲咯，喺呢個機場嗰度考咧，張台好大嘅，大有大嘅 problem， 因為你擺到周圍都係。所以咧，盡量諗個 answer plan， 可唔可以 follow 到啊？好，而家我哋 train 個 answer plan。OK，first with the requirement. I walk through this with you for the first questions. Tax implications. What does it mean? This may be IRO or SDO. 可以嗎？IRO or SDO. Don't restrict your answer to SDO or IRO only. IRO means Inland Revenue Ordinance. All right? And then in case of tax implications, there are three major aspects. If this is talking about income, you have to answer whether this falls within the scope of charge. If this is about expenses or some figures, you are asked about computation. In tax term, we call it adjustment. And the final point is administration, which is likely in your chapter 2 as far as I remember. All right? So there are three aspects for tax implication. So you check about the facts involved. If they are talking about income, that means they are asking you scope of charge. If this is about buying and selling property, this may be scope of stamp duty charge. All right. Second point, if they are talking about figures, they are likely asking you the adjustment or computation involved. If they mention something about time, for example, when to submit return, when to assess, when to receive assessment, etc. This is about administration. Today, actually yesterday, they have announced, HKICPA have announced the final exam special topics, which additionally act on administration. So maybe important. All right? 我唔肯定㗎，我係估㗎咋。Okay, go back to these questions. They mentioned about transaction transfer of shares. So I think about the facts involved, maybe one sell the shares to another means transfer of shares. I don't restrict my thinking process to stamp duty only. It may involve IRO. If I sell shares to you, I may earn money. That means income. So scope of profits tax charge. All right? If that is about stamp duty, that means had to. All right? Had to buy and sell shares. When I discuss scope of stamp duty charge, what is the key points I advised you earlier? Remember to think about exemption. If they are fall within the scope, think about exemption. That means section 27.5 or section 45. All right? How to organize the answers? 6 marks means 6 points. Try to answer 6 points for 6 marks. 好，寫幾多張紙呢？咁樣6分呢，寫幾耐呢？一張紙大約20行至25行。寫幾多張紙啊？半版咪寫得好慢。好，如果 properly 寫6個 point 呢，大約係一版紙鬆少少嘅啫。一個 point 呢，大約係2至3行完。可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁你留意翻你自己 judge 下咯喎 ，and then 你做下啲 past paper， 好似呢啲咁咧，你 judge 下。譬如你今日聽完之後咧，你唔緊要咧，都係再 practice 呢條都得㗎。因為你對考試嗰陣時，其實都係啲 past paper 不過 remix 晒嘅，係嘛？你係試下 practice， 可唔可以18分鐘由頭到尾搞掂晒 ？follow 唔 follow 到啊 ？Okay, before you try to write the answer, you probably will read the requirement B as well. B, transfer this company, transfer to another company. What are the tax implications? another 4 points for 4 marks. All right. Assume I have used 1 minute already for reading the requirements, and then I try to observe the facts. Another 3 minutes. Then we write down the 6 marks, 6 points. 係嘛？好啦，咁而家俾你做個 exercise 喎。而家咧試下睇一睇呢度，跟住咧我哋做一個 part 啦。你覺得邊6個 point 咧要寫落去啊？俾3分鐘你諗。好，夠咯喎。好啦，頭先咧問啲同學咧話睇咗 chapter 8係咪啊？睇咗成晚啊咁樣，知唔知點答㗎？唔知嘅喎，係咪啊？因為咧我本 learning pad 咧係好豐富嘅，只能夠講豐富啦。豐富咧，但係咧如果你要 exam focus 咧，最好睇 past paper， 得唔得？你睇完 past paper 咧，睇多幾條你發覺佢問嘅模式好似嘅，好過你睇嗰本 learning pad 喎，係嘛？如果係 for exam purpose， 我 learning pad 咧以前咧係一個box file 啦，好用嘅，出差咧攞嚟佔枕頭。但係咧你 for exam purpose 咧要睇多啲 past paper， 係嘛？好啦，而家練嗰個，我哋寫嗰陣時咧應該寫啲 key point， 然後諗到已經夠6個 point 啦，就開始寫落個 answer book 度。你留意翻個方法咧，就係唔係一諗到咧即刻寫落去㗎啦。如果你咁樣寫法咧，你係唔知道幾時收手嘅。可唔可以理解到啊？好啦，如果6個分咧，你諗6個 point， 你諗嚟諗去得3個 point 咧，你點咧？你一係諗少咗啦，係嘛？或者你諗嚟諗去都拗爆頭都諗唔到，咁點啊？俾 example， 聽得出啦？我諗咗3個 point 啫，我諗唔到好多嘢啦，得6分，咁我點咧？我俾啲 example 去豐富我個 point，follow 唔 follow 到啊？好啦，如果我諗得2個 point 咧，咁我俾反 example， 俾完一個正面嘅 example 咧，俾一個反面嘅 example， 咁都有機會咧可能攞多啲分。咁你總之咧喺寫之前咧諗下應該點樣鋪排，就唔好一路諗一路寫，一路諗一路寫咧，根據寫英文嘅方法咧係比較慢啲嘅。可唔可以 follow 到啊？好啦，尤其咧你頭先咧冇嗰啲 study pack 喺手啦，你就冇得抄啦，係咪啊？你記得唔好嘗試走去猛咁抄你啲嘢喎。你一抄你啲嘢咧，你係 pay around 冇咗20% 時間，得唔得？Okay, and then with the facts involved, X, Y, Z. Normally, I will square the company. For individual, I will mark a circle. This company is in overseas, and then there's another company in Hong Kong. It owns this company, 90%. HK company also owns another in China. All right, so X, Y, Z owns HKG. HKG owns DG. All right, and then they are proposing XYZ sells the share of this company to another. So mark a clause here. Sell to whom? To OSCO. 我而家畫俾你聽啊，我好熟啊，我睇咗好多次啊，咁我咪咁樣畫咯。你考試唔係咁樣畫㗎啦，你就將佢 XYZ 香港東莞係嘛？跟住咧最撚尾一段係點樣咧 ？XYZ 咧想將香港走去賣咗俾 OSCO， 咁呢3段咪即係講呢幅圖咯？可唔可以理解到啊？好啦，咁我今日專登揀咗啲 example 俾你咧，就係如果考 profit tax 咧，一般咧就會有呢3嚿。得嘛？你翻去咧揾嗰啲 past paper 嘅第1條，好多係考 profit tax， 都係講緊呢3嚿嘢嘅。外國公司、香港公司、中國公司，因為而家要考埋 DTA 咧，咪中意整埋中國公司咯。可唔可以理解到啊？所以咧好容易畫咗咁啦。如果你唔畫慣咧，你可能打橫畫噶嘛。你初度諗到點解要打棟畫噶嘛？點解外國喺上邊咧，中國喺下邊噶嘛？咁你畫慣咗，你就知道佢哋考試嘅題目咧，大多數嘅 case 都係咁樣款。可唔可以 follow 到啊？不過我頭先做 illustration 咧，由於我好熟呢條題目啦，我就咁直接畫俾你睇咁啦。follow 到啊 ？Suppose 你要熟習呢個畫法。好，如果你唔畫嘅話咧，個難處喺邊度咧？嗰個 facts 咧令到你好混亂㗎。 你畫咗咧會對嗰個 facts 嘅理解會清晰啲嘅。遲啲你習慣咗咧，你考 final exam 咧會易啲啊。final exam 咧4科一齊考咧，係咪即係要死啊？4科 A、B、C、D， 你今次10月29號咧諗住帶幾多個篋去考試啊？唔帶篋。好啦，考4科咧係咪要帶2個篋啊？如果我又想走埋咧，咪帶3個篋喎。所以咧，你盡量咧去 summarize 啲 key issues 咯。Okay, so after understanding the requirements, we try to list out the 6 points involved. The first one, you sell the company, transfer of shares of this company to another company. For profits tax income side, you should study section 14. 啱唔啱啊？讀咗未啊 ？Section 14， 快啲讀啊 ！Workshop 1會考㗎啦。All right. Okay. Section 14 requires that 3 conditions must be satisfied for being charged to profits tax. One of the conditions is that this must not be capital gain. All right. So I understand this. I will highlight section 14. For illustration, I explain to you. I will write next to it. This is about capital gain. 好啦，嗱，我所謂嘅 answer plan 咧係咁，呢一邊咧你 suppose 唔好寫嘅 capital gain 唔好寫嘅，你就一諗啊，究竟有幾多個 point 要 discuss？Section 14係其中一個 point 咁解，可唔可以 follow 到啊？如果你寫埋嘅話咧，你係唔夠時間做㗎啦，分到嘛？我而家解俾你聽咧，我會講埋其實我想 discuss capital gain 咯，得啦嘛 ？OK， and then in respect of transfer of shares, I will discuss head 2. Just now, I have mentioned transfer of shares should be head 2.1, head 2.4, because head 2.4 involve instrument of transfer, and head 2.1 involve bought notes and sold notes. All right. Make sure this is Hong Kong stock. There is a definition of Hong Kong stock. You refer to your learning pad. This company is a Hong Kong company, so likely Hong Kong stock. So I will discuss head 2.1 and head 2.4. Now I have 3 points, and I think 6 marks. My points are not enough. So I use my exam skill. Once I fall within the scope of charge, I will discuss exemption. All right? So I try to think about whether Section 45 applies, exemption involved. So what are the exemptions requirements? The exemption requirements are that the transferor and the transferee, the seller and the buyer, they are associated body corporate. All right? So the discussion will be, are they associated body corporate? If yes, then exemption is available. If exemption is available, what happens? I will discuss adjudication. Because this is compulsory, this pair of sections are more likely will be appear in the answer script altogether. All right? And then you think about only 4 points. Any other things you need to address? I will discuss the anti-avoidance provisions involved. Just now, when you listen, there are 2 major anti-avoidance involved regarding the 2-year period, regarding the group finance. 好啦，你去做個 answer 嘅時候咧，係咪呢邊唔鬼寫啊？即係你做 answer plan 咪應該咁樣？你諗到有差唔多6個 point 咧，你係時候開始寫啦。你一路寫可能咧 fold 到啲 idea 出嚟嘅。咁按第一聽咧就圍繞住呢6個 point 咧，盡量去 within 個 time limit 寫完就算。可唔可以理解到啊？好啦，而家要咁樣諗法啦，因為你做得少題目啦。但係如果你係做慣咗啲題目咧，呢啲係咪之前你已經 organize 咗落你嘅 critical files 啊？因為考 open book 噶嘛，唔係考 memory 啊嘛。可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁我咪如果去考 section 45咧，我記得要寫咩，我寫定晒先咯。 如果係考 transfer of shares，我記得要寫咩寫定晒先咯，可唔可以 follow 到啊？好啦，咁佢其實係寫啲咩咧？咁即係將個700頁寫熟晒咪得咯，但係冇可能噶嘛，唯有睇 past paper 多數考啲咩咯 ，follow 到啊 ？OK，let's review the answer. The first point, maybe I make the marking scheme here as well for your easy reference. If you can discuss section 14, that means the sale of the company is likely capital in nature and therefore not subject to profit tax. You will get the 1 mark. Remember, when you answer the question, try to quote the relevant authority as far as possible. So you will write by section 14, the sale of the company is likely capital in nature and therefore not taxable. All right? Some candidates, they copy the learning pad. Section 14 requires 3 conditions. They are as follows: 1, 2, 3, etc. By then, you already raise up the 1 mark. Time involved. All right? You try to write the key points. By section 14, capital gain is not taxable. 可以嗎？咁你練咗個 technical knowledge啫，仲要練埋寫喎。我都頭先有解釋俾你聽咧，你係考3個鐘噶嘛，唔係考3日嘛，所以你練埋點樣寫要快啲。OK，second point. This is involve transfer of shares. So you discuss head 2.1 regarding bought note and sold note. And then, as I mentioned earlier, when you discuss stamp duty, the first one is instrument, the document. And then the second one, the duty amount. For example, here they mention 0.2%. The third one may be the person liable, and the fourth one may be the timing. The third and the fourth one are not so important for examination purpose. If you review the past paper, normally they mention about the first one first, the instrument, and then the second one, the duty amount. That's all. Otherwise, you don't have enough time to copy everything down in your answer book. And then instrument of transfer is what we have discussed head 2.4. After the scope issue, you mentioned about section 45 exemption involved. Associated body corporate. One own the another 90%, therefore section 45 applies. And then mention about compulsory. Section 13, adjudication is required. You need to do the adjudication process. You observe the answer. They don't require you to copy what is adjudication. 睇唔睇到個分別啊？如果你走去抄你嘅 learning pad 啊 ，education 係咁，咁你係嘥咗好多時間㗎咯。佢只係需要你知道咧，當你攞 section 45嘅 relief 咧，你要去申請 adjudication， 咁就夠啦，因為得1分咁多，可唔可以 follow 到啊？如果俾10分你咧，你猛咁講啦 ，education 要喺邊度做啦？去銅鑼灣天橋嗰度啦 ，etc 啦，可唔可以 follow 到啊？但係而家唔係咧，俾1分你要淨係寫呢啲嘢。OK，the last point。Anti-avoidance, 2-year period. Sometimes you may also mention about the group finance as long as you mention about 6 valid points. And you can imagine in your answer book, this may account for 1 page or 1 page plus a little bit paragraph. 睇唔睇得出啦？得啦嘛？ Okay, then we move on for second point. This time, B part. Transfer of the shares, DGCO, transfer to this one. Transfer to this one. So this time we are selling here. So if you mark, this is A part, this is B part. So quite similar to what we have discussed, but now you are selling non-Hong Kong company. This DG is non-Hong Kong company. All right? So all these points are quite similar. All right? So which one is more relevant? I will say, okay, this is not applicable because this is non-Hong Kong stock. All right? Then we discuss this point as well. This is not taxable because either capital gain or offshore the Long Kong company is likely offshore sourced。可唔可以 follow 到啊？好啦，使唔使交 stamp duty 咧？你可以有呢個 point 啦，未必使唔使交 profit tax 可以 capital gain 啦，可以係 offshore sourced 啦。咁你又話呢個係 non Hong Kong stock 啦，咁你可能咧要解釋咩叫做 non Hong Kong stock 啦。The definition is in Section 2 of Stamp Duty Ordinance。好啦，個 definition 咧係咁解。Transfer of which is required to be registered in Hong Kong. It does not say that an overseas company must be non-Hong Kong stock. An overseas company may be Hong Kong stock as long as the transfer of the share is required to be registered in Hong Kong. Example in Hong Kong is we established BVI company, all right? But the shares are kept in Hong Kong. The transfer is required to be registered in Hong Kong. So the BVI company shares are basically Hong Kong stock. So you need to address this point as well. 咁就差唔多4分啦，分唔分到啊？ Okay, answer as well. The company is capital nature because in the question they mentioned about long term. The company has been kept for a long term, 10 years. This may be capital nature and therefore not taxable. And also the non-Hong Kong stock definition. And therefore stamp duty is not payable as well. 好，咁啊完咗呢一條咯。大致上咧 stamp duty 咧係咁嘅style 問你咯，係嘛？咁咧時間關係咧，後邊嗰2個 example 咧留翻你自己睇咯，係嘛？咁但係你温嘅方法咧，你可以 download 啲 past paper， 跟住咧睇翻個 past paper analysis。咁我suggest你温書嗰陣時咧就咁樣喎，唔好一年咁樣温喎。一年一温咧，温下你發覺哇期都唔同嘅咁樣，咁你就好 frustrated 噶啦。咁你咧就係揀同一個 topic 你一齊温，咁你温得4、5期嘅同一個 topic 咧，你就會了解到個闊度同埋深度。咁你就開始咧覺得我日考完咧可以搭飛機走噶啦。follow 唔 follow 到啊？好啦，記得可以做呢啲咯，得嘛？好，咁我哋講完呢個 stamp duty 咧，我哋就去到 next topic。不過咧，我哋 take 10分鐘 break 嚟咯喎，開始咯喎。Okay, the second part of tonight's seminar is about the second topic, depreciation allowances. As I mentioned to you earlier, in the examination, they have tested you depreciation allowance up to nearly 20 marks, quite substantial. All right. Sometimes they ask you to write purely essay. That means explanation of the tax treatment involved. But most likely, they will require you to do the computation as well. So therefore, you need to observe the rules involved as well as the computation. Okay, depreciation allowance, broadly speaking, in Hong Kong tax law, you probably need to calculate the plant and machinery depreciation. Plant and machinery, P&M. And then building allowance, industrial building, IB. Industrial Building Allowance, IBA, and then Commercial Building Allowance, CBA. So basically, there are 3 types of depreciation allowances to be tested in your examination. So let's move on for the relevant details. First of all, the fixed assets involved, no matter this is plant and machinery or building, they are capital expenditure, therefore disallowed by Section 17(1)(c). All right? And whether you need to write this down in your examination, you observe the requirements as well as the marks involved. All right? If they ask you directly about depreciation allowance, you don't have to mention this is capital expenditure, therefore disallowed. On the other hand, if they ask you about the deduction of certain money, then you need to, if applicable, you mention that money expenditure is capital nature and therefore disallowed it. All right, that is one point. The other point is about if you acquire the capital assets before commencement of business. For example, you commence business by today, October 8th. But before October 8th, you already acquire some fixed assets. That means before commencement of business. Generally speaking, this should not be allowable. All right? But by this section, the capital expenditure is moved as incurred on commencement day. That means if I buy the assets on, say for example, 1st of October, before the commencement of today, then this will be treated as bought by today, so that you can claim the depreciation allowances involved. Okay, in examination, when you will be examined these points, when they test about first account. If a company finish or complete the first account, normally in the circumstances of commencement of business, 啱啱開業. All right? If that is the case, they may ask you about the capital expenditure incurred before commencement. Then you need to quote this section. The capital expenditure will be treated as incurred on commencement day. If that is the case, you can calculate the depreciation allowance for the whole year, even though you only use it for half of the year. As long as you use it by the end of the year, you can claim the full year allowance. You don't have to apportion the depreciation allowances. All right? And then page 21. Commercial building allowances. Whether a building is classified as commercial building or industrial building, we use the 6 qualifying trade for IB under this section. For examination purpose, very unlikely they ask you what are the 6 qualifying trade. All right? You use most common example for qualifying trade. One is factory. If the building is a factory for manufacturing purpose, you can claim industrial building allowance. The other one normally examined is that the company is doing storage business. Remember to differentiate storage business and warehouse. Warehouse can be used by a trading company. The trading company is not doing storage business. All right? 中文即係嗰啲叫做租倉嗰啲咧，而家有門生意係專租貨倉俾人㗎，全倉二啊嘛嗰個，有個鬼佬行出嚟咧打功夫嗰個咧，係嘛？佢哋咪做緊 storage business 咯。但係如果我買一個 warehouse 係裝我公司啲文件咧，我就唔係做 storage business。我可唔可以 follow 到啊？ But storage business can be claimed as industrial building. And the last one normally will be examined is that the building is used for R&D purpose, research and development, according to section 16B. Such building will be classified as industrial building, and you can claim building allowance based on industrial building rules. If you cannot satisfy these qualified trade, you can only claim commercial building allowances, which is only 4% on cost. So how many years you can claim all the 100%? It means you can claim 25 years. 咁即係好慢咯，係咪啊？好耐先至 claim 晒嗰個building allowance. All right. In examination, sometimes normally when you sell a building or buy a building, you will have to buy and sell the land as well. Then you need to apportion the cost involved. Only the portion attributable to building required to calculate IBA or CBA, not the land portion. Okay. Then how to account for other items. Sometimes you don't buy a building, you incur some decoration expenses. Then that means you are entitled to the leasehold interest of such part, the decoration part of the office. Then you can still claim the 4% annual allowance. 好啦，呢一個位咧，遲啲咧就要去做 comparison。comparison 我寫 against 啦，就係 renovation。嗱，如果新裝修 decoration， 佢當你個 building claim 4%。如果係 renovation 咧，即係翻新，唔算新裝修，咁咧就可以 claim 5年。咁即係快啲 claim 咁解，可唔可以 follow 到啊？好啦，有啲咩行業咧成日要翻新嘅？飲食啦、hotel 嗰啲咯，係嘛？佢個大堂 etc. 成日要翻新啦。咁佢如果佢 claim 4%，咪要 claim 25年，咁嗰個經理都走啦，係咪？咁所以咧就俾佢 claim 快啲，咁啊改咗例咧 renovation 翻新嗰啲咧 claim 年可以 claim 晒。分到啦嗎 ？Okay, and then page 23. In some circumstances, if you satisfy the industrial building allowance criteria, so-called qualifying trade, however, part of the building is office, there is some concession as long as the part, the office portion or the CBA portion, does not exceed 10%. Then you can claim the whole building as industrial building. So in diagram, if I have a building, the lower part is 10%. The upper part is 90% factory. The lower part is office. Then the whole building can claim IBA. We call it 10% rule. If the 10% is more than this exceeds 10%, then part of it will only claim CBA. The capital expenditure will claim CBA if more than 10%. All right, in examination, normally they will account for the percentage by 4 areas. Account for the 10% or 90% by 4 areas. All right. Then if you dispose the building, you need to calculate the balancing adjustment. When you dispose, you need to calculate the balancing adjustment. Why is that? If you claim like CBA, IBA, for IBA, how many years you need to claim all the allowance? 20 years. The first year is 20% plus 4%. And then the remaining 19 years for the other 4%. So altogether, you can claim 20 years for IBA. All right? However, if, say for example, after a few years you dispose the property, you have not yet claimed all the allowances, then you can get a so-called balancing adjustment. All right? How to calculate this? Normally, you will use so-called the residual expenditure. It simply means the tax written down value. And you calculate you compare the tax written down value against your sales proceeds. If your sales proceeds is more than your tax written down value, we calculate the balancing charge, excess of sale over tax written down value. Balancing charge is actually classified as income, taxable. The other way around, if your sales proceeds is less than the tax written down value, which is very unlikely in nowadays, because normally when you sell the property, it's much more higher value than you purchase the property. So normally you will get balancing charge as income. All right? Okay, page 25. When you sell the property, as I mentioned before, you need to calculate the selling price attributable to the building in order to calculate the balancing adjustment. Sometimes the IRD will use the basic according to your purchase, a portion between the land and building elements, based on your price paid before. Otherwise, if you think your land is much more variable, then you need to adopt different basic by furnished to the IRD evidence. Why I need to differentiate the price between the land and building? Because I want to calculate the balancing charge as low as possible, so that you don't have more income to be tested by the IRD. Okay, then balancing allowances. Sometimes if you are not disposing the property, or you dispose the property for purpose unconnected with your business, then there's no balancing allowance. For example, you demolish the building for sale, redevelop and for sale, then this is unconnected. Therefore, no balancing allowance will be allowed. And then page 27. Anti-avoidance. The first one is to sell between related party, arm's length. Section 38B. Normally the sales is between related party, which is not at arm's length. Section 38B is sale between controlled parties. If that is the case, the IRD will allocate the fair value of the assets involved. Okay, if you sell the building together with assets, we may also apply another anti-avoidance provision. You sell assets altogether at one price. Then IRD will allocate the selling price to each individual asset as well. All right, okay, up to here is about building. You gather all the relevant points and then you draw some key notes to summarize this. Then in your examination, you will select which particular point relevant to the question asked. All right, and then next, plant and machinery. If you buy a plant and machinery, you get some allowance by way of following a pool. We call a pooling system. The pooling system classifies the assets into 10% pool, 20% pool, and 30% pool. And that pooling system is stated in Inland Revenue Rule number 2. You go to your learning pad, there's a list, Inland Revenue Rule number 2. Normally, in your examination, they will give you the percentage involved. You don't need to check the list. All right? If they say this is 20% pool, then you give the annual allowance, 20%. So either 10, 20, or 30% pool. You pool all the relevant assets in the same pool. You also get initial allowance, in short form IA, for 60%. All right? Okay. Apart from that, if, say for example, sometimes you only get proportion of allowance. That means based on the revenue involved. Example。咁咧而家讀咗呢個來料加工合同未啊？睇咗書關於來料加工合同未啊？睇咗未啊？好啦，咁啊有啲詞嚟咧，話俾你聽，你可以上網聽翻前幾堂講嗰啲咯，喺公會嗰度有得聽㗎啦。咁有來料加工合同嗰啲啊，來料加工合同咧就係 50% taxable。嗱呢個 topic 咧好緊要㗎喎，因為最近咧打咗啲官司，有進料加工合同、來料加工合同，你要分咗佢啦。好啦，如果來料加工合同咧俾你 50% 係 taxable，50% 係唔 taxable。咁我啲 assets 嘅 depreciation allowance 咧，亦都係 50-50， 可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁啊用呢一個方法啦 ，proportion to the revenue that is taxable， 分到啦嘛？好。And then other assets, some other assets, plant and machinery, they are not following the depreciation pooling system. We call it special provisions. For example, prescribed fixed assets. For example, computer, you can get 100% deduction at one go. You get 100% deduction. That means totally written off. For example, computer. In your learning pack, there is a table of these sections. So you put this table in your critical file involving section 16G, etc., etc. And then when you sell the prescribed fixed assets, the proceeds are taxable. Limits to deduction previously claimed. Okay, if the equipment is under lease agreement, for example, hire purchase, you can only claim depreciation allowance under this section in respect of capital element. So each installment involves part of it is capital element, part of it is interest payment. You can only claim the capital element portion for IA. All right, so try to get some past paper example and do some calculation to make sure you understand how to allocate the capital elements of each installment for claiming IA under hire purchase. So that means that for hire purchase assets, you don't use pooling system to calculate it. You will separately calculate the hire purchase agreement assets. And then you will, therefore, the machinery is not to be pooled. If all the installments have been paid, then you will pool the assets in the year following the year in which ownership passed to taxpayer. That is all installments paid. 好，間中會考呢啲 calculation， 所以你要抄翻啲 example， 係嘛？你如果抄 example 咧，當然個 learning pad 有啦，你最好揾 past paper 睇，方唔 follow 到啊 ？Okay, and then what is prescribed fixed assets? Section 16G excludes hire purchase agreement. Hire purchase agreement, for example, computer under hire purchase terms will not be classified as prescribed fixed assets. You can only claim IA on capital and then AA on the tax written down value. Other item. Movable partitions, you can claim IA and AA. These are classified as plant and machinery. And then sometimes you are repairing the fixed assets. Then you can claim deduction. 100%. You are not bringing fixed assets to the company. You can claim repair and maintenance at 100% deduction. And then what we have discussed just now, renovation. Renovation expenses. not firstly used， 即係翻新啦，唔係第一次買嗰啲咯。Not firstly used 啦。And then you can claim on the amount 5 years. Each year 20%. That's all. And then page 33. You buy a patent. It will be deductible in some case. What case? If asset is used for producing taxable profits and patent is purchased from third party, unrelated third party。好啦，咁呢度咧介紹多一樣嘢咯喎。你哋嘅 Learning Pack 以外咧，係咪有一本細書仔啊？嗰本叫 Fresh Card。嗰本 Fresh Card 咧，其實個製作過程咧就係將嗰本大書將重要嘅嘢 summarize 咗落本細書度。嗰本細書咧大約係 below 200頁，可唔可以理解到啊？入邊咧有好多呢啲咁嘅 table。咁你哋將你做咗 past paper 理解咗嘅嘢咧 mark 翻落本細書度。嗰本細書其實就係你嘅 critical files。可唔可以 follow 到啊？嗰本細書咧，大約有我估計有2/3有用嘅 for 考試 purpose， 係嘛？咁相對嚟講咧，你咪由200頁又變咗得百零頁咯，係嘛？跟住再睇下上次考過啲乜嘢，多數今次唔考，我估咋？我估咋？如果係咁嘅時候咧，將嗰百幾頁咧又變咗得100頁，可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁你寫咗我100頁咧，經常考嗰啲。因為我100頁之中咧有70%係升入考，即係得翻70頁啫。可唔可以 follow 到啊？你要咁樣擇啲 focus 咯，即係你睇 past paper 先理解到㗎，得啦嘛 ？OK，and then new item environmental protection machinery (EPM) or environmental protection installation (EPI). This is EPI. For EPM, you can claim 100% like prescribed fixed assets. For EPI, you can claim 5 years like renovation. EPI is related to building. 譬如有一個外牆咧裝嗰啲吸嗰啲熱嘅反光嗰啲啦 ，say for example， 咁你我個內籠咧唔使咁熱啦，就唔使開咁多冷氣咯。同埋我啲環保嘅裝置啦，關於個 building 咧分5年，關於個 equipment 嘅咧就分100% 俾佢 claim。Alright, when you sell the machinery etc., you need to use the proceeds to be chargeable. That means taxable, but kept. That means maximum to the deduction previously allowed. All right? Okay, when you refer this PowerPoint, section 16J, for selling of EPM, EPI, normally your taxable amount will be kept by deduction claimed. But this is quite different from PowerPoint 33, section 16E. When you sell the patent, all the proceeds will be taxable, even though the proceeds are more than your deduction already claimed. All right? That is quite special for patent. Patent, in respect of selling the patent, the capital gain amount will be taxed. All right? For other items like EPM, EPI, the capital gain amount will not be taxed because you will be taxed only kept by the deduction already allowed. Okay, next page. The amount allowed. When you study the new law, normally they have some transitional arrangement. That new law is enacted 2 years ago. So the transitional arrangement for assets brought forward into 2008-09 will have some transitional arrangement to be observed. However, in your coming examination, you will be likely tested by 2010/11. All right? So normally, if that is the case, you don't memorize these transitional arrangements. That also gives you some hints. When you study the tax law, you don't study, for example, interest income is exempted starting from 1998, not relevant for your coming exam. You will just call interest income from the bank deposit is exempted because blah, blah, blah. All right? You don't memorize the old relevant year. Okay. Leased assets, the last point for fixed assets. First of all, you mentioned about what is lease. By your section 2. Actually, section 2 is a definition section. A lot of the terms, you can check section 2 of IRO to see the definition. Lease, in respect of plant and machinery, regarded as arrangement which a right to use is granted by owner. Example, Hong Kong company. Grant right to use plant and machinery in PLC factory. If that is the case, these assets are called leased assets. All right? Under what circumstances this will happen? This transaction may be like import processing， 叫做進料加工合同 import processing。咁你睇翻你個 learning pack 咧，就會 call 一個最近嘅 case 叫做 data tronic。咁通常考啲新嘢，你要留意翻咯。OK，the leased assets because of the nature they are leased. Why is leased? According to Section 2 definition, such arrangement, the Hong Kong company transfer the plant and machinery to the factory in China, grant the rights to them to use. If that is the case, these assets are leased. If they are leased, you have learned above Section 16G, that means prescribed fixed assets, or Section 16I, that means environmental protection machinery. They exclude lease assets. So these assets, even though they are prescribed fixed assets or environmental protection machinery, they cannot be claimed for 100% deduction. This is Section 16I. All right? Okay, apart from that, Section 39E disallows depreciation allowance. If they sell, the lessor has purchased assets and subsequently leased back. We call this transaction sell and lease back. 好，10年咧考過一次，咁有時間就睇下咯，係嘛？呢一個位啊 sell and lease back. However, the other item disallow depreciation allowance for assets used wholly or principally outside Hong Kong. This will be examined quite frequently because this is related to data tronic. When you review the past paper or the case study, that means the past paper in your learning pack at the back of the learning pack, you will observe this has been tested before. All right, try to read the Q&A to understand the logic behind. All right, okay, finally, I draw a diagram here. Before you ask question, I draw a diagram. What are the tax treatment for fixed assets? Altogether. 100% item, Section 16G. Prescribed fixed assets, Section 16I. Environmental protection machinery, Section 16E. Patent. All right, Section 16B. R&D plant machinery. All right, what else apart from buying assets? Repairs. Some other points included in your learning pack. Replacement of loose tools. Example, carpets. Registration of trademark. You can mark these points in your flashcard. In your flashcard, there's a list of these items. So you can mark the percentage involved. Okay, what will be disallowed? For example, new purchase of loose tools. Only replacement will be allowed. New purchase will not be allowed. All right? And then what are the treatment in between? Maybe plant and machinery. IA 60%, AA 20%, IBA, IA 20%, AA 4%. For CBA, there's no IA. Okay, a general summary of the fixed assets involved. All right, when you are asked about fixed assets, maybe running from 0 deduction to 100% deduction. All right. Okay, then let's try one past paper examination questions so that you know the depth or width involved for depreciation allowance. I have selected the heavy one in your Q&A, short question 5. When you observe this short question, it means in section B of your examination. Okay, in your examination, the paper involves section A and section B. Section A will be a case study. Section B will be short question. This question, short question 5 at page 10, involve depreciation allowances for a company in the relevant year, together with the necessary explanation, 18 marks. This time they involve a lot of calculation, all right? So maybe not necessarily 18 points, because the calculation may account for a lot of marks, all right? Okay, then leave you maybe 3 minutes to read the facts involved. What should be calculated for depreciation allowances? 咧有個 email 嘅 list 嘅，你打個 remark，我將今日寫嘅嘢咧 email 俾你。Okay, let's review the facts involved. First of all, a company which is an investment holding company. I highlight this part because this is the seller. This seller sells a property to the buyer, which is our taxpayer in the question. All right? When you are asked about building allowance, you need to observe the seller position. If the seller is property developer, the calculation is different. All right? So I need to ascertain seller whether this is property developer. In the question, they mentioned it already. This is investment holding company. That means they are not property developer. All right? Later on, I will explain to you why we need to ascertain this. And then they construct the building and finally sell it to another company, which is the taxpayer in the question. This is a wholly owned subsidiary. In your examination, normally you will be distracted by the facts involved. This seller and the buyer is related. You have learned from the PowerPoint, for example, when there are controlled sales, when a buyer and the seller are related party, we will discuss this section. Section 38B, controlled sales between related party. Right? However, when you observe this, you probably need to ascertain whether this has been asked in the question. All right? The question does not address this issue. They just ask you to calculate the depreciation allowances. So you may assume, say for example, the transaction is at arm's length. Otherwise, you will discuss a lot of issues on section 38B. This draws your attention how to select important point. That means you refer the particular requirement before you put down answers. If you put a lot of details on 38B, then the answers are not so relevant. All right? Okay, the buyer used 16.1 mil to buy a cost of 14 million. Why is that? The cost is incurred by the seller. All right? And therefore, the buyer is paying a premium for buying this cost. As a result, the seller earns some profit. What is the profit earned? In this case, it's 2.1 million. That brings the point regarding the position of the seller, the status of the seller. If the seller is property developer, this 2.1 million will be accessible. All right? If the seller is property developer, they build some property and then sell it out. This is their business. Therefore, this 2.1 million profit will be chargeable to profit tax. If that is the case, then the buyer price may be allowed to be used for calculate building allowance. If in this case the seller is not property developer, it is very likely that that 2.1 million will be treated as capital gain. All right? That capital gain will not be taxable. As a result, even though the buyer pays 16.1 million, they cannot use the purchase price to calculate building allowance. They can only use. So if the answer, the property developer, the seller is not property developer, if the answer is no, then you only use cost of construction or so-called qualified cost for calculation of the building allowance. Can you see the point? All right. Therefore, the first point for building allowance calculation, observe what is the status of the seller. All right. Okay. And then we classify what are the costs involved as qualifying costs. For building, the land cost is excluded. All right. We need to apportion land costs and building costs. So this is excluded. Nothing can be claimed for the land cost. And this leveling the land is also related to land. Therefore, nothing can be claimed for this land cost of leveling the land. Architectural fee and the construction fee, which are relating to the construction of the building. So these two should be classified as qualifying costs. So the qualifying cost altogether here is 6.6 million. You don't use the relevant premium to gross up the 6.6 million because the seller is not property developer. You only use 6.6 to calculate the building allowance. Then after that, you only ask whether this 6.6 million is to be claimed for IBA or CBA. If that is to be claimed for IBA, you need to be observed that this is qualifying trade. And below here, this taxpayer is doing storage business. This is qualified trade. One of the 6 conditions, Section 40. If that is the case, that 6.6 million you need to claim IBA。理唔理解到個 flow 啊？係嘛？咁即係話咧，而家我哋咧第一個 point 睇個 seller 係咩身份先啦。第二個 point 咧就係邊啲係 qualifying cost 啦，即係建築費啦或者 architect fee 啦。第三個 point 咧就係睇佢係 IBA 抑或 CBA 啦。咁我哋確定咗 IBA 咯喎，咁你個 answer 咪應該寫 IA 20%、AA 4%啦，睇唔睇得出啦？好啦，成個流程咧，跟住我就要話埋邊一年去 claim 咯喎。咁我哋話咧係幾時買翻嚟啊？1月買咗翻嚟，然後咧撥入去3月嗰盤數，咁即係0910咯，可唔可以 follow 到啊？喺今日情況之下咧，我哋 claim 呢個 IAAA 咧就係 fall within 0910。咁即係話你第4樣嘢要睇嘅咧，就係個 accounting periods 咯。follow 唔 follow 到 ？Okay, in the questions they ask you to give explanation as well. So what you need to do, explain the 4 steps, and then do the calculation to prove your understanding. All right. Apart from that, what else you need to observe? And then you observe the facts involved. There is lift. And for lift, this is classified as plant and machinery under IRR 2, the 10% pool. All right. So therefore, the installation is also classified as the plant and machinery. And therefore, these 2 points will be classified as the total cost for the plant and machinery, lift. However, the buyer paid 16.1 out of 14 million costs. So what are the costs to the buyer for these 2 items? Clearly not only 2 million, all right, because you pay more than 2 million to buy the 2 million costs. So how to gross up? You multiply by your payment, 16.1, divided by the total cost involved, which is equal to your purchase price for the lift. And after you calculate this purchase price, which is gross up from the 2 million, then you calculate IA 60%, AA 10%. And one point to be observed, this AA of plant and machinery is on tax written down value. For AA for building is on cost, is not on tax written down value.分唔分到啊？咁做晒呢啲動作咧，就可以攞晒18分，係嘛？咁如果攞到18分咧，好多噶咯，係咪啊？咁你就差唔多咧做到。你哋幾點考㗎？12月29號？未知啊？夜晚啊？夜晚就真係搭飛機走㗎啦。check 清楚幾點考咯喎，係嘛？好 ，let's check the answer. I also draw your attention about the marking scheme. You identify, not necessarily in the order I explained it to you, but include all the points involved. The plant and machinery for lift. So you identify this and explain what are the allowance involved. You get 2 points, roughly. All right? And then the lift cost, capital expenditure, includes the installation or alternation. That means the installation of the lift will be included as cost. So another 2 marks. All right? But you are not paying 2 million. 2 million equal to 1.2 plus 0.8. You are not paying 2 million to buy this 2 million cost. You are paying 16.1 out of the 14 to buy the 2 million. Therefore, this figure is actually 2 million times like that. So the real purchase price is 2.3 instead of 2. Then you use this 2.3 million to calculate IA and AA. For AA, remember on the tax written down value. All right? Then this calculation for depreciation allowance on plant and machinery earns you another nearly 4, roughly. So purely for the plant and machinery calculation and explanation, you already earned 8 marks of the 18 already. 可唔可以 follow 到啊？咁呢度聽嗰陣時咧，留意翻嗰個重點喎，因為係唔一定夠時間寫，一定要寫嗰啲重點落去㗎。Okay, move on for the building structure. Building, you can IBA or CBA, so 1 point. Highlight the issues involved. Then 6 qualifying trade. And because they are doing storage business, you can IBA. Conclusion, IBA, therefore another mark. 分得出啦嘛？好啦，你翻去睇嗰啲 past paper 咧，留意咧冇 marking scheme 嘅。冇寫幾多分嘅，咁你到時要 judge 嘅咯喎。有陣時咧個 model answer 好長啊，咁你要 judge 咧，如果我成張抄晒落去咧，都唔夠時間嘅，所以你揀翻啲 key points。And then finally on the last page, qualifying expenditure, so-called deemed cost for this section depends on seller status. And the seller is Helmuth, is not developer. Therefore, you only use the qualifying cost without grossing up. So use 6.6 million only without grossing up. After that, you calculate IBA, initial allowance 20%, annual allowance 4%, but on the cost only. You have about 2, 4. Sometimes the total marks involved may be more than 18, but they grant you 18 marks. 分到嗎？立一個 answer 同埋題目。記唔記得今日開始講俾你聽嗰陣時咧，話要注意咧，唔好淨係模仿 answer， 要諗下個 requirement 點樣去 think about 去到個 answer。你去到考試咧，就將嗰啲 facts 改過晒㗎啦。但係問嘅 subject matter 會一樣嘅，所以你要諗個 thinking process 係點樣。可唔可以 follow 到啊？ All right. Okay. That's all for tonight. In summary, you have been talked about stamp duty plus depreciation allowance. For stamp duty, you have written down a transaction like the property time flow. Remember that? All right. This can be the mind map as a critical file for your reference. So when you deal with the past paper, you use that mind map. All right. You have some other table which is also very relevant for your perusal, like the timing, like the duty amount, which can be retrieved from your learning pad. So you take these pages out as your critical file. And then for depreciation allowance, lastly, I have written down a fixed access from 0% deduction to 100% deduction. All right? You use this as your mind map. Try to use it for different questions. Mark the relevant points. Then you summarize all the relevant points in one page. Then you can use it easily in your examination. All right, that's all for tonight. As I mentioned, if you download the past paper, use our past paper analysis, and also listen to the audios. It's good to read the learning pad when you are not sleepy. All right? But if you want to read quickly, try to listen to the audios first. And if you still have time, read the learning pad. If you have time, you do the past papers first to understand the width and depth of the questions involved. All right? In case of any question, I think you have my email address, etc., to contact me. All right? Before you go, write down your evaluation form for HKICPA reference as well. All right? Thank you. If you have questions, stay behind. If not, then fill in the evaluation form and submit to HKICPA. The staff here will collect the form for you. Thank you.